Have you ever wondered why countries seem to go to war without actually, declaring war? Think about it. When was the last time you heard a president or prime minister give a big speech officially declaring war on another nation? It feels like something out of a history book, right? Well, there's a reason for that. For centuries, formally declaring war was standard practice. It was like a formal notice, a diplomatic courtesy almost. You'd send a message, or more dramatically, you'd recall your ambassador and cancel their passport. This was the gentleman's way of starting a fight. But after the absolute devastation of World War II, everything changed. The world looked at the rubble and decided, never again. In 1945, the United Nations was formed, creating a whole new rulebook for international relations. The UN Charter basically made aggressive war illegal. It stated that countries could only use force in self-defense or with the approval of the UN Security Council. Suddenly, declaring war meant openly admitting you were breaking the most fundamental rule of the New World Order. Not a great look. This put nations in a tricky spot. They still had political goals and conflicts, but the old way of doing things was now off the table. So, they had to get creative. Let's look at a couple of big examples. The Vietnam War. The United States was deeply involved for years, flew with hundreds of thousands of troops on the ground, but it never declared war on North Vietnam. Why? Well, for a few reasons. Officially, the U.S. framed its involvement as helping South Vietnam in a civil war, not attacking a sovereign nation. Declaring war would have legitimized the North Vietnamese government in a way Washington didn't want to. Plus, there was the Cold War elephant in the room, the Soviet Union. A formal declaration of war against a communist ally like North Vietnam would have been a direct challenge to the Soviets. And nobody wanted to risk World War III. Domestically, the U.S. government found a workaround. The Gulf of Tonkin Resolution in 1964 gave President Johnson the authority to use military force without a formal declaration from Congress. It was a blank check for war, without having to use the word war. Then there's the Falklands War in 1982 between the UK and Argentina. When Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, Britain responded with a full-scale military task force to take them back. But did Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher declare war? Nope. From the UK's perspective, this was a clear case of self-defense, which is perfectly legal under the UN Charter. They were simply reclaiming their own territory. Declaring war would have been legally unnecessary and strategically foolish. Why? Because a formal declaration of war triggers a bunch of international laws of neutrality. Countries like Chile or Spain, which might have been quietly helpful to the British, would have been legally obligated to remain strictly neutral. That could mean refusing to sell them supplies, or even having to intern any British ships or planes that entered their territory. By not declaring war, Britain kept its options open and made it easier for friendly nations to offer support under the radar. So, it boils down to this. Modern conflicts are often fought in a legal and diplomatic gray area. Not declaring war gives leaders more flexibility at home, often bypassing lengthy legislative debates. It keeps conflicts from escalating into larger, more dangerous confrontations, especially when superpowers are involved. And most importantly, it prevents the automatic triggering of international neutrality laws. It allows other countries to choose their level of involvement or non-involvement without being forced into a corner by legal definitions. The nature of conflict has changed. Instead of formal declarations, we now have authorized military actions, police actions, and counter-terrorism operations. The language is different, but the reality on the ground can be just as intense. The age of declared wars is largely over, replaced by a more complex and legally ambiguous world of modern conflict. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into how our world works. I'll see you next time.